Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. Please take your seats. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes. Thank you very much. Good morning. Please take your seats. We will be starting in a moment.
Buenas, ahora sí. Bueno, muchas
Good
gracias.
morning.
Bienvenidos a todos.
Thank you.
Mi nombre es Martín
Welcome,
Aguirre, soy el
everyone.
director de
I'm
redacción del
Martina
País
Aguirre. I'm the
y tengo el gusto de darles la
director
bienvenida
of El
al
País,
quinto
and I have the pleasure of
evento de
welcoming
Foro de
you
Movilidad
to the
Sostenible
fifth
presentado por el
event of
País y el
on
conjunto de las 6 cámaras de
sustainability
comercio
presented by El
europeas,
País,
la
organized
Cámara de
jointly with the
Comercio
six European Chambers of
Uruguayo-Alemana,
Commerce,
la
the
Cámara
Uruguayan
Oficial
German
Española
Chamber
de
of Commerce,
Comercio,
the
la
official
Cámara de
Spanish
Comercio
Chamber of
Francesa en
Commerce,
Uruguay,
the French
la
Chamber
Cámara
of Commerce in
Mercantil
Uruguay,
Uruguay-Italia, la
the
Cámara de
Uruguayan Italian
Comercio
Chamber
Uruguay
of
Países
Commerce, the
Nórdicos y
Uruguayan
la
Chamber
Cámara de
of Commerce
Comercio
Nordic countries,
Suizo-Uruguaya.
and the Swiss
Creo que lo dije
Uruguayan
todo bien
Chamber
esta
of
vez porque
Commerce.
a
I
veces
think I
he
mentioned them
tenido algún
correctly
error que
this
me lo han
time
hecho pagar.
because sometimes I have made mistakes and
Pero bien, en
they
este
have
día precioso que
let me
tenemos acá en
know on this
Maroñas,
beautiful
el
day
clima
that we have
amenazaba
today
no ser
at
tan benigno, pero por suerte
Maroñas.
pese al frío está
Apparently, it
muy
wasn't
lindo,
going
así
to be
que
so nice, but despite
bienvenidos
the
a
cold
este
weather, it's
evento.
a very beautiful
Queremos
day.
empezar
Welcome to
agradeciéndole
this
a
event.
nuestros
We'd like to
auspiciantes, a
start
UTE,
thanking our
ANCAP,
speakers,
Chevrolet,
UTE, ANCAP,
BBVA,
Chevrolet,
Fidocar,
BBVA,
Scotia, Cámara de
Fidocar,
la Construcción del
Scotia,
Uruguay, Volvo
Chamber of
Camiones,
Construction of Uruguay, Volvo,
Lanking, Fábrica
Camiones, Land
Italiana,
King,
Nestlé,
Fábrica
CUTSA,
Italiana, Nestlé,
Evital
CUTSA,
y el Banco
Evital,
Interamericano de
and
Desarrollo
the
BID. Así
Inter-American
que son unos cuantos
Development
sponsors,
Bank.
también
So
espero
we
haberlo
have
dicho bien,
quite a number of
Guillermo, a ver,
sponsors.
no haga enojar a
And
nadie.
Guillermo, let me know if I said
El
that
evento ha sido
properly.
nombrado de interés
This
ministerial
event
por el
has
Ministerio de
been
Ambiente y cuenta con el apoyo de Pacto
declared
Global, Red Uruguay y
interest of
Eurocámara
ministerial
Uruguay.
interest and counts on the support of the
En esta
Global
quinta
Compact
edición nos
and the
acompañan
Uruguayan
importantes oradores, tanto nacionales
Network
como
and the Uruguayan
internacionales,
Chamber.
para
Your
conversar
chamber,
sobre la
we have
evolución y las
relevant
perspectivas de la
speakers both
movilidad,
from
las
Uruguay
perspectivas
and
para
from
UTE y
other
ANCAP,
countries to
así
discuss
como
the
también los
outlook on
proyectos que se están
mobility
gestando en nuestro
and
país en esta
the
materia.
prospects for ANCAP and
El
UTE,
evento va a ser
as well
moderado
as
por
other
nuestro
projects
compañero acá,
that will
Luis
be
Custodio, editor de Economía y
organized in the
Mercado.
country. The
Y
event
para
will be
quienes nos
chaired by
acompañan de
Luis
forma
Custodio,
virtual,
who
nos
is
pueden
the
seguir por
editor of the Economy and
elpaís.com.uy,
Market
Facebook
section
Live
of
y
El
YouTube
País. For
Live.
those who
Y
are
por
following
supuesto a
us
todos los
virtually,
presentes, muchas
you
gracias
can
por
follow us in
acompañarnos. Y para
elpais.com.uy,
empezar el
Facebook
evento
Live,
y
YouTube
no
Live,
dar más
and all
vueltas,
those who are
le
present,
damos
thank you for
la
joining us.
bienvenida a Cecilia San
So
Román,
let us
presidenta
start by
ANCAP, que va a tener una
welcoming
conversación
Cecilia
con
San
nuestro compañero
Román,
Luis
President of
Custodio. Así
ANCAP,
que
and
muchas gracias y que disfruten.
thank you very much and enjoy this meeting.
Bien, Martín, gracias. Buenos días para todos. La ingeniera Cecilia San Román,
Thank you,
presidenta del
Martín. Good
directorio de
morning,
ANCAP, está aquí
Mrs.
con
San
nosotros.
Román.
Bienvenida. Primera charla de esta mañana.
This is the first
Largo
talk of
recorrido
this
hasta el mediodía,
morning.
así que
We
aprovechemos bien el
have
tiempo.
a long time from now until
Gracias por
lunchtime, so let us
acompañarnos.
make the most of this time we have. Thank you for joining us
Desarrollar
today.
movilidad sostenible.
What has been ANCAP doing regarding sustainability? Well, quite a number of things, though we have sort of a low profile in the sense that we're low-key. ANCAP for many years have been working on the topic of mobility. You might recall that in 2008, the law 1895 was enacted, which mandated ANCAP to incorporate biofuels produced both at Alur, which is a company of the ANCAP group that produces ethanol and biodiesel. So we have a long path. 10% of bioethanol is added. We had a period without combining biodiesel, but it was combined at 5%. And this was done when we started the energy transition. This was based on the Kyoto Protocol, which Uruguay had subscribed. This was the initial step in the incorporation of renewable energy sources in Uruguay. And we were low-key, there was a limited visibility, but then we had the energy transition in terms of the power supply, electric power supply, which was most successful, which has now reached more than 90% of renewable energy sources in the power grid. This was low-key, but we consume this every day in our fuels. Fortunately, there is continuity in terms of the policies associated to energy supply. And there are some things that are still in early stages, in the draft stages. But what are you planning for this future, this coming period? As ANCAP, there is no doubt that we adopt technologies and international conditions. So I think that our challenge, and in fact, it is our intention, is to be prepared for everything that might come. We will be exploring all the potential energy sources. And when I say this, I'm also referring to mobility. We are working on e-fuels, on hydrogen, on biofuels, the second generation biofuels. You might have heard about SAF for aviation fuels. So we're working on diverse lines, and also, as we were speaking before we started, the conditions have also changed. Argentina now has had an amount of natural gas production, so this has led us to rethink a strategy in the sense that natural gas is a transition type of fuel. So we really have to be aware of what happens in the neighboring countries. Yes, we also have the infrastructure developed. We already have gas pipelines that are underused. Yes, we have 3 in the country. Yes, Casablanca, the one of UTE, was the one that was not being used. I don't want to speak on behalf of my colleagues from UTE, which is the Uruguayan power company, but we do have one on the border to Argentina in Paysandú, and the gasoducto Cruz del Sur, where ANCAP has a 20% participation. The one at the north belongs entirely to ANCAP, but these are infrastructures that are availability, and we should make the most of these, particularly with an energy power source that is a transition source. So this might be changing for these coming stages. After a change in the grid, decarbonization is a major goal, right? But now with the gas so near, well, yes, like you were saying, we are just embarking on this. We have managed to achieve a purchasing agreement with Argentina, which lowers the cost. Within 1 year, we can save $28 million as a result of the drop in the prices of Argentina. So this will drop even further. This becomes an energy source which we must not at all disregard. But of course, it does have its advantages and disadvantages in the sense of what I was saying. One wishes to diversify, ANCAP wishes to diversify the types of energy resources, and this involves investment. And as a small country that we are, we cannot invest in all the different technologies, but we'll have to opt for the one that is most interesting and the one that is more profitable. So that's the type of analysis we are conducting right now. Argentina uses natural compressed gas. We have other types of technologies. Argentina has knowledge that dates back many, many years. These are things that we have to take advantage of too. But when we speak about hydrogen, this is a decarbonized energy type of energy, and natural gas is a transition towards another. So that is why we are assessing this right now. Which is the opportunity? How much could be incorporated, and within what period of time, if we're going to use this as a transition? But it's going to replace what and in what sectors? Well, essentially, what we're saying right now, although the matrix of the electric power supply is a renewable source, we now need to figure out a solution for transport, and that is why we are here right now. So we have grid with 37% of fossil fuels. This is not only used for transport, but also for the heavy industry, for aviation, and for maritime transport. And there are other types of industries. The last three I mentioned are those that are more difficult to abate. Now, heavy haulage is the one that is more difficult to replace with electric power supply for long distances. So that is a niche where we have to start working, and CAP should work in that niche. So we are thinking about hydrogen, going to do a pilot project with our trucks with hydrogen. So that is a development you have in mind. Yes. So what stage are we in? We are in the very initial stages. We're trying to obtain funds. But yes, we have been working on this at ANCAP. Right now, we are driving this forward, and we want to highlight that. We're going to go step by step, not to be involved in mega projects. We don't have sufficient scale now. We want to have a mature technology and have the local capacities to respond to that technology. So all that has to be strengthened before launching a major project. So transition with natural gas would be great, because this is on the other side of the streets, as you say. And you're already signing contracts at prices. Yes, as from May the 1st, Uruguay has started to receive natural gas at very interesting prices. And to what extent have these prices changed? We are now $10 at 1 million BTU. In last winter, it was 21. And with a promise of the Argentine government to continue to lower the price, the regulations will change, and this price will lower yet further. This is then for the benefit of the end users. So beyond the transition that you mentioned, regarding natural gas, there also are possibilities of having other types of autonomies through the generation of other types of fuels or energy sources. You spoke about green hydrogen. What other possibilities do you have when you consider this in the context of mobility? Well, we continue working on biofuels, and what we're working now is replacing the raw materials with other energy sources, other raw materials that don't compete with food. So other types of grains, we're testing other types of crops, because these should be developed in our countries. Let us recall that the biofuels law aimed at reducing emissions, but this should be done with national raw materials, because this was with intention of promoting agriculture and the Uruguayan industry. So these are crops that should not compete with food, but should also be developed in our country. So this is the case of biofuels. And one interesting fact is, and this is something that we discussed in our team, when we say that in the country we have about 9,000 to 10,000 electric vehicles, the combination of biofuels that is done in the country is equivalent to 60,000 electric vehicles. That is why I say that we're working on sustainable mobility, but silently under the radar. So the colleagues from the electric utility received the recognition for this. But this is an example of what we have been doing in the country. We started back in 2008, 15 years ago. But as I said earlier today, this is no longer a novelty. We go to the gas station, we are saving this to the equivalent of 60,000 electric vehicles. So although this is not directly in the vehicle, we're working at the level of the industry. We continue to produce fuels and will continue to produce fuels for a long time. But when producing fuels, we also have a commitment. We have the obligation of reducing emissions, of decarbonizing and trying to reduce these. So only in terms of the refinery, so that you see the size of the industry, going from fuel oil over to natural gas, this would be the equivalent to 45,000 electric vehicles that shift from one type of fuel to another. So although this is not directly used for e-vehicles, this is used in the previous stage in the industry. We do 45,000 e-vehicles in the industry production and in the types of fuels for 18,000. So in addition to that, you need to bring about changes in the infrastructure, well, everywhere, in fact. This is why we are in the assessment stage. If we're going to work with hydrogen, we have to have a hydrolyzer. We have to think of hydrogen stations. And the same would happen with natural gas. We have the gas pipelines, but we have to have compression stations to provide this type of fuel for the cars. This all involves investment. And because we're a small country, we really have to aim properly in the correct direction. We cannot use the entire spectrum because this would not be profitable considering the size of our market. Now let's go back to the topic of green hydrogen. Along the chain of green hydrogen, there are other types of productions, and I don't know whether ANCAP is interested in this. For example, production of CO2. For example, we could also speak about that. A path has already been traversed in that sense. And also we have aviation fuels. What do you think about that? Well, we're working along several lines in terms of hydrogen. Hydrogen for vehicles would be for trucks, but also working on natural hydrogen to see whether in subsoil we have reservoirs of natural hydrogen. And more in the long term, the offshore project for hydrogen production, but this is something for another stage. We're also working on CO2 capture. This is a project for the production of e-fuels and also the transformation, which is an environmental commitment we have in the national commitments. This is transformation of the conventional refinery towards a biorefinery. This biorefinery would then allow going from grains that was just used to producing biofuels traditionally, would then be producing renewable biodiesel, which could also be used for the maritime application, and we'd also produce SAF, which would be used for aviation. So this would be multiplying the production of biodiesel by 3, but using a different type of technology that leads to a reduction, a 3-fold reduction of that produced by the current biodiesel forms. Well, maybe next year, when we discuss this once again, we might have some new topics. But for 2 months, that's fine. Cecilia San Román, thank you very much for joining us today. And also thank you for disseminating what we're doing today.
Invitamos a la ingeniera Claudia Cabal, gerente de planificación de UTE. El saludo para la presidenta de Cabrera, que un problemita de salud.
So, our congratulations. Well, we are sorry, but the other speaker, unfortunately, had to stay at home. So we invite Claudia Cabal. So we then, actually, you are in the same situation as ANCAP, starting to sketch the plans and plans. What do you think of? What is in your first sketches? Well, first of all, I wanted to welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, sharing our vision, the plans that we have, and history. Because when we speak of sustainable development, it appears as if we were going to discuss current issues. So I like to go backward and think of how UTE, the company, was created. If you think of how electricity was introduced into Uruguay, we think of the hydroelectric production, using water as a natural resource, as an autochthonous resource, to be used for the development of the country. So sustainability is in our very creation, because of course the thermal stations were the backup for those cases in which we didn't have enough water. So if we think of, for instance, changing the matrix, well, there we enter fascinating topics, because we think not just on conventional renewable energy, but non-conventional renewable energy, and all the development of wind energy, and somehow solar, biomass, all the sources. And that leads us to think that really today, at times, we can meet those demands with conventional and non-conventional sources. So that leads us to think of sustainability and the fact that we are using resources available, local resources, and also to think of independence, energy independence. So that is why I like to go a bit backward because the sustainable vision of Uruguay, and specifically of UTE, is in our genetics. So if you start to think of all the plans and projects that we can think of, they are closely linked to that sustainable development. If you think, for instance, well, we have a very good basis of renewable energy. Well, we have, on the one hand, we are emitting less GHG than in our stations. But if we can sell that renewable energy, then we are using not just, we are pulling mobility, and we are supporting industry so that they can also find an easier path to decarbonization. So sustainable development, well, clearly mobility is the very essence of our society, in freights and everything. So isn't it wonderful to be able to offer that renewable energy that may help? So that mobility project, in a way, is a project that is in the basis of sustainable development. But even the leaks plan is in that also that, because if I have fewer leakages, then it also collaborates in that sustainable development. So I think that all the components of UTE's project, the traditional ones and those that will come in the future, are absolutely aligned in that sustainability vision. Because if you think of it, in the end, what does being sustainable mean? It's being efficient economically. If you do it in a rational manner, you end up being efficient environmentally because you're using your resources well. So the greater our efficiency in the use of resources, the more we will make of the projects that for the use of our local resources, we are going to be economically efficient, we'll have a social impact, and we'll have an environmental impact that will lead us to say, well, this is not an isolated project, this is part of a plan. And it's a plan that, in a way, is based on the natural resources in the country, because you cannot, if they're not available, of course, you can't use them. But in a way to say, let's not put a stop to development, because development is a source of jobs, of health, of education. But let's do it in the way that we can be efficient. Because sometimes we forget, sometimes we think that these are new fads, but it's in the very essence and the genesis. Yes, and in Abute. So, and at the ministry, that vision of the environmental, social, and economic. So with that basis, with the challenge of decarbonization and the change of the matrix that typically we think of, what do you think of doing? Well, in the 5-year plan, that I assume that is what you are thinking, well, it's we are frankly developing it, but it's it would be too early to speak of specific plans because it is underway, clearly. But what is clear is that the board of UTE and senior management, well, that 5-year period should aim at a triple impact: economic, social, and environmental. That is, that all the projects and the plans to be developed may consider and bind those 3 dimensions with no antagonisms. Development should not go against the environment or social aspects. We firmly believe that those 3 dimensions may be put together. It may be harder, you have to think of it, but we have all the background, everything that we mentioned earlier. So, well, the president is absolutely in line for considering that triple impact. So, and unconventional renewables. So the expansion is not necessary just to meet future demands that we don't know, but whatever is coming. What will be the path used? Now, is there more margin for solar, for instance? Well, future developments point at solar, indeed, as you say. So clearly, we continue to focus on renewable energies and very strongly focusing solar, but we also need to consider that when you have a system that you have to ensure the supply, you must always have a thermal basis. Even if you say, well, I want to be 100% renewable, if you have to consider all the energies, we know it's there. Because it is necessary to have that support. It's necessary to say, well, UTE has the obligation to provide power all across the country at all times. So we need to do it sustainably with the best mix of sources available. Well, today we see a great expansion of solar, but we must also think whether we maybe require some backup source. And obviously, what you said, natural gas, for instance, even if gas may have its characteristics, gas might be more favorable than others. So we need to think of a mix. And it's a mix that will give us the perfect solution, the optimum solution. Sometimes it's not what you would consider the best just when you are designing it, but there's no doubt that, for instance, green hydrogen, as was said by the president here, is being analyzed, it's being studied, and UTE is always there in studying the state-of-the-art technologies. We have high-performance technical teams, and we are aware of everything that is going on, not just in the country, but also in other countries, and we participate in many forums and many places where that is debated. Well, the use of electricity in mobility, specifically in transportation and especially for passengers, has been promoted greatly by UTE, from the availability of equipment, infrastructure for charging, to different incentives for conversion and to switch to those vehicles. So how does the story continue? Well, we always think of promoting electric mobility, either with a grid of chargers or with taxis or with public transportation. So, and there's no doubt that I would like to go back to this issue, to decarbonization. How we can not just mitigate emissions, but also decoupling. You can decouple it from GHGs. Note that the energy matrix can help you today. We have an economic development that is absolutely decoupled from GHG production. So there's no doubt that this is a contribution, changing the matrix, and also UTE specifically of how to decarbonize the economy in Uruguay. And I think that that is wonderful because it shows when you are speaking of sustainable development, you are speaking of how to meet the needs of the present, not neglecting the needs for the future. So you can say, well, but this is something that could not happen. Yes, it can happen, but I need to change my development economic model if I want to continue to grow from the point of view of the country, and somehow to give the same conditions, social, economic, and development. Somehow I need to see that my development should not lead me to consume resources linearly the same that as I need to grow. So when I can decouple that, what I'm really achieving is to meet the requirements for sustainable development. How can I do that sparing the future possibilities? So we have to change that development model. And Uruguay is an excellent example of how to do it by developing and changing the matrix, which so today you can decouple economic growth from the GHG emissions. And as we said earlier, not only industry, but we all know, and we see the publications of GHGs, we all have people who contribute more or less, and transportation industry has an interesting, plays an interesting role. So it's wonderful to benefit that sector that way. As the president of ANCAP just said, with long haul transportation. Well, may have to need other alternatives, but I think that's a path to follow. And at UTE, we are working with topics that we talk a lot about, but need to consider, because we've always talked about mitigation. If I'm changing the matrix, I'm generating less GHG. But today, we know, because of all the international agreements that Uruguay has signed, such as the Paris Agreement, that the world needs to adapt, that climate change is a fact, and we need to continue to mitigate, and we need to produce solar energy, wind energy, autonomous energies. We need to adapt because the change is here. Today, for instance, we face extreme winds. We may have to face winds that jeopardize the integrity of cities or your infrastructure, because the climate change shows the occurrence of extreme events that change us and that make us face different situations, and that needs to be analyzed because the change is here. It's not a future, indeed. So we need to think of where am I going to locate future facilities? Well, you need to study based on climate projections. But Uruguay is prone to flooding, for instance, in particular. Would I put it here? Would I put it elsewhere? So it's not just whether I need 100 mega, 200 mega. Where am I going to place it so that it will remain? And what do I do with the existing facilities? Well, at least I need to consider that there are events that may affect me and that may tear down my services. So I need to have response plans. That happens in cities. That is an issue that is being worked up in the Ministry of the Environment with the adaptation, with the national adaptation plans, and particularly UTE has been very active in the national plan for adapting energy. How do we think of a country? How do we conceive the electric grid that is interconnected? So if I have a failure here, I may get source of my energy from elsewhere. Well, mitigation is essential. So how do we face adaptation? Yes, it's a changing reality. And as we always say, we need to manage, permanently thinking about how to adapt, because we always have to adapt and changing the way we work and using indicators that show our actions, because the context is changing faster. And as the International Experts Committee say, it will go even faster in the future. Well, thank you, and thank you for this talk. Thank you. Thank you for being with us.
So we will now continue. The next speaker is Cecilia Correa. She is an energy specialized in energy from the Inter-American Development Bank, and she is responsible for the project portfolio here in Uruguay. Welcome. Welcome. Hello, everyone. So let us now see what is the vision of the IDB regarding mobility, sustainability, and electric mobility. Thank you very much, Luis. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here this morning. It's a bit cold, but the sun is shining. Regarding sustainable mobility, at the bank, we think this is a priority. We have to make progress towards more sustainable transport forms globally. Transport accounts for 25% of CO2 emissions. So it is expected that this will be duplicated by 2050 if we have the current trend, if business as usual is maintained. As to Latin America and the Caribbean, this is even cause for greater concern because 40% of the sources come from transport. So the truth is that this implies that our cities are more polluted, and 8 out of 9 persons living in the cities in the region are exposed to breathing air containing particulate matter above the levels recommended by the World Health Organization. This is because, on one hand, we have vehicle fleets that are much older. We also have regulations that are not as strict regarding emissions from vehicles and the industries. In addition to that, public transport has opportunities for improvement, and these are not being used. That is why our cities are more polluted. So the challenge is greater and also a very important challenge. In other words, how to make progress in this sense. There are 3 pillars. On one hand, we have to start by trying to reduce the amount of trips one makes, better land organization, improving the logistics, and on the other hand, we have to change the transport options, having a more active forms of transport, for example, walking or using bicycles, micromobility, and in some cases where greater use of public transport is not done, and also trying to improve things. For those of us who cannot reduce or change the forms, we have to, with the first 2, we could reduce 80% of the emissions. So, and what we cannot change, let's seek options for this. So what can we expect to, in the sense of improving electromobility? Well, we understand that we have to advance along the 3 lines at the same time, because electromobility is advancing, but this won't make progress massively. It won't occur overnight. So the normal change from one type of vehicles to others and the regulations that have to be respected and developed. So we have to advance along these 3 lines at the same time. What is the degree of development we have in terms of the IDB policies? The progress in terms of e-mobility in general worldwide has increased. We see that the sales of e-vehicles over the past years reached 17 million vehicles. So this is 20% of all new vehicles sold globally, and 25% higher compared to the previous year. So that's globally, yes. And if we look at the case of Latin America, if we look at Latin America, we see that this is barely 1% of the entire e-mobility fleet. It's very small, but it is growing in a sustained manner. Sales have duplicated over the past years, year after year. The sales over the first quarter were led by Brazil and Mexico, Colombia, Costa Rica, and Uruguay in the first place. But we have to highlight that in the case of Colombia, it increased 4-fold. The sales of e-vehicles increased 4 times in this quarter compared to the same quarter last year. And in Uruguay, it increased 3 times in this quarter. So we see that there is a significant increase there. Brazil is at the head with 50% of the e-vehicles fleet in the region. Uruguay ranks 5th. But if this estimated per capita, Uruguay really leads the ranking. Now, looking at our country specifically, we see that Uruguay has been growing maybe more timidly at the beginning, but in terms of e-mobility, in 2021, the sales of e-vehicles were 2% of all vehicles, all new vehicles sold. In 2022, 3%, 2023, 2%, and in 2024, 9%. And we see this when we go along the streets in the city, that is the case. And this is not only in terms of the demand, but also the supply has improved. And we also see more models. Last year, we had 11 new brands were incorporated into the national market. And your question regarding how we see, what is the outlook is and the opportunities, there are many opportunities. This is growing. Our region is a very green region regarding the electric matrix. It is the greenest in the world, so there's a major opportunities out there. There's a great chance of advancing towards e-mobility. And also regarding the development of the value chain, this is most relevant for our region. In the region, we're going to need e-vehicles and batteries, but we also have what many need. We have 40% of the world reserves of lithium. They are in our region. 36% of the copper reserves are in our region, and 12% of the nickel reserves are also in our region. So these are necessary with this aim. We have to take advantage of this. Our countries already have, many other countries in the region have an automotive industry that is consolidated. In the case of Brazil, for example, they are the fourth global exporter of combustion buses, but they're also working on e-vehicles, e-buses in Brazil, now 100% electric buses and manufactured in Brazil. So there's an interest, and I'm going to be hearing more about where we're heading during this forum, but also retrofitting of vehicles. So this will also be an interesting part of this forum. What actions is the IDB doing in the context of that change? As I was saying, in the bank, we think it is essential to advance towards sustainable mobility. We work with a multi-sectoral approach. We think it is necessary for transformations such as these in the entire sector. We work in the transport sector, in the energy sector. We work in the education sector, in the labor market, climate change, urban development. So this is a multidisciplinary effort that we are carrying out. We support countries of the region, both the public sector and the private sector as well, through the Invest option. This is the developing strategies, development of new projects, and also regulatory issues, development of value chain. So we contribute with non-reimbursable technical contributions, dissemination of knowledge in the region, and also with loans in different options. I would also like to tell you about specific actions that we are working on in Uruguay. And so that you're all aware, the work we do is also very valuable. Even with many of those who are present here, we do this on a daily basis. One of the projects is a technical cooperation done with 2021 with the Energy Directorate and with the German Uruguayan Chamber of Commerce. This is for technical vocational capacity building to facilitate e-mobility. So when we are going to purchase a new vehicle, you might not know what workshop to take it if you don't know what to do that. And you hesitate when purchasing an e-vehicle, so because you don't know who is going to repair it. So we're working on this project on regulatory issues and technology development, but we saw there was a lack in technical vocational capacity. So we're working to this non-reimbursable technical cooperation on this topic. We first analyzed the entire value chain associated to e-mobility. We defined the main profiles which should be tackled through capacity building. And we're also working with the Don Bosco workshops, with the Technical University, and with the Hatfield University in training trainers in order to develop the curricula regarding e-mobility capacity building. This has been work done in integration with the e-mobility group. We have counted on the support of this university from Finland. We learned from their experience. We saw the methodology they applied for teaching. And this is how these programs were developed at UTEC and in the Don Bosco workshop. This also involves the link between the private sector and the education sector. The private sector detects the needs and work hand in hand with the education sector. So it's very important to bring this to our country. So I convene all the companies that are here to speak with Don Bosco, to speak with UTEC, and to speak with us as a link so that we can really take the needs they have and incorporate this into the curricula of the capacity building programs of these organizations. Both UTEC, which has a specific module following this methodology of more innovative, competence-based programs and incorporating e-mobility technologies, this will be incorporated into the curriculum of technical e-mobility course. So they have a very strong interest in having a dialogue with the industry and working hand in hand with them. There's another relevant project that I would like to refer to, and we're working on this together with the Energy Directorate, with UTE, and we're going to have the Ministry of the Environment also working on this. And we look forward to also incorporating the university, and has to do with the second life of batteries. E-mobility poses many, many benefits, but we have to see how the final disposal of batteries is going to be dealt with. So the concept of this technical cooperation we are developing right now is to help develop the regulation for the import, use, second life, recycling, and final disposal of batteries. So we have to analyze what the market would be for the second life of these batteries. We also have to develop capacities to assess the status of these batteries. And finally, this is quite challenging because there is not so much experience to learn from other places. Yes, this is quite new. But there are countries that are making progress on this topic. Evidently, they have a larger amount of e-vehicles, and they have also been dealing with this issue. Yes, the third point that I would like to refer to is yet another project that we're working on. This project is led by the transport unit of the bank. This aims at supporting the government in improving the public metropolitan transport system of Montevideo and the institutionally required with this aim. Also considering the most vulnerable persons. Let me highlight that we are speaking about funds that have to do with sustainable mobility programs of Latin America and the Caribbean regions. This is a first regional fund that deals with mitigation and fighting against climate change through e-mobility. There are resources of $400 million, both in terms of concessional funds and highly concessional funds of loans with the aim of promoting e-mobility, of bringing hydrogen for mobility in the cities, and seeking to improve the resiliency of the electric networks and transport. So this is the entire outlook.
La pata privada del BID Invest también entiendo que está trabajando, tratando de fortalecer.
Yes, I understand that IADB is also supporting this for the metropolitan area. Yes, we work in close coordination. The three windows, the public window, that is where I work, the private window of the investor. And well, we see that this involves many sectors and many players. So we have to develop the enabling conditions so that the private sector may also move forward with their projects. So it's highly coordinated. So Cecilia, thank you for coming. Cecilia Correa. Cecilia is a specialist of the sector of energy of IDB, and now welcome Mr. Alejandro Ruibal, Director of SESEN and President of the Uruguayan Chamber of Construction. Good morning, a pleasure to be here. A year ago, we had a discussion here, and at the time, we mentioned the projects that could not be delayed for the city, transportation in the metropolitan area, the need to have a portfolio of projects for the private sector to invest. And a year has gone by. What's new? It's well, it's cold, so let's say hot things. Well, very little has happened. I think that, well, nobody debates that the concept of sustainability is well enrooted. Everybody mentions it in discourse, in regulations, in practice. Mobility is a bit neglected, and it's hard for us to start acting and to execute projects, to implement projects. I can mention several, but we continue to overdiagnose the issue of mobility in Montevideo and the metropolitan area. We haven't yet solved the ship terminal and many projects that you get used to them not getting solved, and that's not a good thing. We have to address those issues, and obviously we need to plan. You need to have to make decisions on solid grounds, but we need to act. We haven't solved the issue of drinking water. That is not exactly related to that, but it has to do with quality of life and sustainability. Now, in terms of mobility, what worries me is that we are not even discussing to reach to ensure mobility, especially public transportation. What fails there? Well, I think that we have not given the support that the companies that survive as they can in a city that has denied them infrastructure. There's no good investment for public transportation. They have not been helped to make circulation more nimble. Some work, some public work has been done, but too little. So they haven't worked well in multimodality. Montevideo is a beautiful city. It's a boutique city. It well deserves a mobility, a multimodal mobility system that may improve the quality of service, and inviting people to leave their individual cars and to live with a public transportation system so as to sell more bus tickets. That would be really helpful. So there we have a problem. Going to actions. And how should that be? So you say that we have lax in terms of management, and we are over-diagnosing the issues, and we have many plans, very well studied. Well, I'm not so convinced that they are very well studied. There are some ideas about. There's a very good thing that I think there's consensus, more or less, a firm consensus of the trunk concepts, the different situations. Yes, there are trunks that are clear, then there are collectors branching from there. We need to know how to go from the collectors to the trunks, but if that exists in other parts of the world, there it should exist here, because Homo uruguayensis is not such a thing. We live in a world where cities have solutions, and you have to benchmark yourself against the cities that are architectonically and urbanistically similar to us, and this is European cities. Uruguay is a European country implanted in America, so you have to look at other experiences. So I don't think there are some projects that have been more or less analyzed, and there's no master plan for the mobility of the city. But I would also say that sometimes excellence hinders the good things from happening. Because if we are going to develop master plan, it's going to take us 20 years. So all the proposals on the table today are partial. Yes, but there is more or less consensus. So, well, of course you can make errors, but the margin is low, because more or less there's a consensus of the truncal solution. So we would have to choose some and start moving in that. And of course you need to think of to take care of the details. And another thing is you can't fail. And that is why Uruguayans, we don't do things, because we are afraid of making mistakes. So, and the politician, I understand the government that makes mistakes. Sometimes that's the end of you as a politician. So you need to you need to accept the consequences. So sometimes inaction has to do with the fact of politicians' reluctance to make mistakes. So now, if you ask me, no, we need to move forward and to solve. I always put as an example the Ceibal plan, 1 laptop per child. How often did we discuss that IT technology would be used with children, with schools, and we went back and forth and advisors from here, from there, until President Vasquez said, what works in the world? Well, here, 1 laptop per child. So he put it there. He bypassed the Ministry of Education, and he put it through the technological laboratory. And so afterwards, everything got its support from the Ceibal platform. I think that we need to take the Ceibal plan of mobility, start with some things. And what would be that an agency? No, the agency, let us not create more. I don't mean the infrastructure agency that we have mentioned, but governance, because here we have a confluence of different agencies. You said the Ceibal plan was done outside the ministry. Well, we've talked about metropolitan governance for years. You should do it one day. You need to call 4 players. If we all know each other, you agree. Of course, there are things that need debate. I'm exaggerating, but I think that that can be fixed. Well, what infrastructure? How do you build it? How do you fund it? And who operates it? Well, the same people that are operating transportation. So we have to listen to them. It's one we, and so then infrastructure, they also have to give their opinion. So I'm sorry, but there, what is missing is leadership, an objective leadership that may think, well, by this time we should have this ready. You talked about the current operators. Beyond the modality, do you think that the current current actors could be done? There are different options, BTR, the cable train, etc. Well, yes, I think that all the solutions have to respect sustainability. Nobody debates that. And there may also be different solutions that combine. In a corridor, it could be BRT. Another, it may be a cable car, more consistent with Montevideo, more delicate, maintaining greenery, making it easier to go from one place to the other, and not a BRT that divides, that physically divides city. Nobody goes by an articulated bus that goes 50 centimeters away from you because you need a whole street. Now, in a cable car, you just wait for the cable car to go by, and then, yes, but in some places, BRT might be the best solution, and we need to solve multimodality. Where are people going to concentrate? How can I make people go there in a bicycle or in a car and use the next new system? It's much more than just the vehicle with wheels. As if we don't fix, yes. Well, the numbers are there. Speaking of the levels of circulation, as you said, corridors defined that are the most used to us. Well, I'm not a specialist. I worked with infrastructure many years, but I had to work with complex projects, and I think that you always need to think of the projects that will be more beneficial. I would start with the Italia Avenue and Giannatasio South, because if you put together the Rambla, Rivera, and Italia Avenue, 120,000 cars go through those. I need to put them, to make them take a bus. In 8 de Octubre, another street, there are buses that bring many people. There are 50,000 trips in cars. Now, if I want to overcome that inertia, I need to go where there is public and it's those that are in the cars, not in the buses. I need to make it more comfortable to them. And those are younger people that may be ready to drop the car. Anybody that more or less has a modern and a comfortable means of transportation, they'll adopt it. Yes, and that's a good opportunity to adapt any of those technologies to the concepts of sustainability. Well, you don't have to talent. You don't have to invent things that are not already successful elsewhere. It's very simple today to look for similar success cases, extrapolate them and adapt them. Now, inventing theoretically as a consultant and debate, and then nobody wants to run the risk. So you have to go to things that are already working, adapt them, looking at the best thing. Because why should Montevideo have a Class B solution? No, we need a European solution. We deserve it. And today we have the funds and financing. And so we find a Class A solution for Montevideo that may include a public that is not using the system. Well, the number of positive things of a public, sustainable mobility system is is huge, and there are examples all over the world, so you can't make mistakes. Well, so the first option is electrification and then having alternative fuel. Well, I don't debate that it should be electric. That's for certain, both for BRTs, we agree. And in the case of a tramway or a cable train, in this case, it would be with chains, not with batteries. I think, and hydrogen, all those fuels. Well, maybe if you imagine a suburban train through the train station, there is a study by a French consultancy that gave the guidelines. So, well, I think that electricity is the mature thing.
So is Plan Ceibal working? Well, hopefully we could make a call for a tender. Well, that's like a preliminary process. Alejandro, thank you very much. Thank you, Alejandro Rival. So let us continue. We are on time. Well, sometimes we need to put on our glasses. But let us now go on to one of the panels we have organized for today, Sustainable Transport in the Region. With us, Claudio D'Agostini, General Manager of General Motors, Alexandre Selski, Director of E-Mobility and Volvo Buses Projects in Latin America, Alvaro Santiago, Deputy General Manager of CUTSA. Welcome. Good morning. There's someone missing still. Claudio, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for the invitation. So here we have different things that we'd like to tackle. Well, now, yes, welcome. We have the full panel with Alexandre. Claudio, at General Motors, there is an interesting view regarding this topic, without doubt, and that major challenge of transformation of the energy sources and the electric vehicles. Tell us what ideas you have in that regard. Well, the world is changing completely, particularly in our industry. We see dramatic changes, and in our case, for many decades now, we have been focusing on e-mobility. This has to do with a market position. So what we see today happening in the world, particularly in Uruguay is a benchmark, is an example of a very rapid change that is taking place, and that is great. So what we see is that, in fact, this is a future. This is where we would like to position ourselves. General Motors, all along its history, has been a company that has always focused on developing new technologies. And in our country, for example, 5 years ago, we launched a vehicle with 6 airbags, the one that is the most affordable in the countries, and also the turbo engines, the one that is more affordable in the market. Then we have a Unistar project, which is the basis for our future. So we have always been working on launching new technologies, new developments, but also with a view to the future. And the future, without doubt, is going to be electric. So it's interesting to see what the role of the different brands is and the different firms we have in this new context. We'll continue speaking about that. Alexandre, thank you for joining us today as Director of E-Mobility and Projects of Volvo Buses in Latin America. Sustainability goes beyond electric buses as such. and also the purchase and the availability of a bus. This project takes far behind that. Tell us about your experience. Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. This is a key topic. We have heard this morning that decarbonization goes through things that go beyond a bus or beyond electromobility. Sustainability has to do with topics as to how we manage the construction of these buses, the entire value chain. We have heard today about the materials we use today for producing our products is sustainable. The assembling lines are sustainable. So that is the experience we bring. We have been developing products for many years now with a view on sustainability. This is not only on electromobility in order to produce decarbonization, but also with the efficiency we heard about. Because when we produce cars and put them onto the street, and when we take them out of the street and put persons into the buses, we're already reducing emissions. Now, if these people go into an articulated bus, we are even more efficient. If we go to a bi-articulated bus that we heard could be a VRT, we are even more efficient yet. And if we can move this with electric buses, then we are incorporating far more efficiency and sustainability through e-mobility and also supporting the decarbonization project. So that is a path that Volvo is contributing to with the experience of the city of Curitiba. This is my city where the VRT system was born. This efficiency is something that we have supported, and we have jointly worked on this in order to bring about solutions, not only from the sustainability standpoint, but also from the economic standpoint. These are technological changes, so the economic aspect is also very important. How can we implement more efficient solutions, spending less? Today, we have very strong pressure on the public budgets. We have a strong pressure to invest. Industry is really under strong pressure through all these changes that we are experiencing. So it's very important to be efficient. So I see that along that path is where we have to work and walk. So the experience of Volvo is very interesting, and particularly the city of Curitiba, which we know is a leader in the region in terms of green attitudes. Now, if we go through the facilities of Kutza, we see so many buses are connected to the electric grid of the urban buses in Montevideo. Are you meeting all the plans you had for changing your bus fleet? Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, we are involved in a process of many years that has to do with technological renewal and the incorporation of e-buses into our fleet. 25%, we have 171 electric buses. I'm going to have 280 by the end of this year. That is a goal for 2025. Yes, this is a public commitment we assumed in 2022. Every 5 years, we're going to renew 25% of the fleet so that by 2040 we have 100% of e-buses in our fleet. This involves major investments in our fleet and infrastructure. We are investing in our charging stations, coexisting with diesel buses as well, things that we cannot interrupt right away. So this poses a major challenge. And of course, this is a major investment for us. It's more than $100 million. 20% of this investment is in infrastructure, precisely. And so the civil works and all the infrastructure. Yes, there's an entire logistics challenge involved there. Yes, very much so. Now, the main challenges are an efficient management of charging, and electrification of the fleet has an impact in all the different areas of the company. This is a process we began back in 2010, 2012. In 2016, we purchased the first electric buses for testing purposes and assess the performance and the challenges involved in the operations. In 2020, we purchased 20 electric buses in the framework of a public program for acquisition of the fleet. In 2023, we purchased an e-bus with a different technology, also for testing purposes. And now we're purchasing from two different brands. Naturally, if a diesel bus is charged in very few minutes, here we have a longer charging period overnight. We have logistics that have to do with managing the charging of the vehicles and to maximize this process. This also involves cost. So there is a software that we're finishing with the development of, which turns on given charges at a given period of time, depending on the service assigned to that bus on the following day. So quite naturally, planning this with a certain autonomy is a challenge that we have faced and are now dealing with. So all these things are involved with electrifying a bus fleet. Yes, it's not so visible for users. So I'd like to anticipate and say the following. Sustainability goes far beyond electrification. We'll go back to that topic. Yes, Alexandra was speaking about the concept of efficiency per passenger transported. It is interesting to know what the solutions are, the ones you have been considering for the city, and what examples can we learn from that really yield results. Multi-solutions are smart ways of contributing to the city. Multimodality, as we have heard in terms of planning. This is not only bus transport, but bus transport in Latin America is something that is very much present. Our cities in Latin America have the concept of bus transport that is quite big. And in our reality, there's a high demand for this transport. There's a higher demand for transporting many more people. So if we really manage to do VRT, for example, that is an option. VRT is an efficient solution, which we saw that the cost per passenger for implementation and for implementation time, and also per flexibilization, even though a tram, once you implement tram, then it has to be there. A VRT terminal, if the demand goes in another direction, you can manage to develop another trunk line. So this is something I have to incorporate when planning a city, how we can make this a solution out of this. It is important to have a public policy, a government policy that makes this planning endure over time. And with electromobility now, we face even a larger challenge. We have new interlocutors, we have new stakeholders that have to be consulted. For example, electricity companies, charging stations. So far, we didn't have that in the case of transport. So if we don't plan things adequately, we're speaking about energy. Energy requires planning periods of 30 to 50 years. And if we don't plan this adequately for the coming 30, 50, 100 years, today, the decisions we make will have an impact on the future. It's about sustainability. So if we don't look at this together today, implementing a VRT or implementing a tram will lead to having problems in the future regarding energy availability. Claudio, what is the role that the brands play at this moment of change? If we look at the development of technology to do it, if we look at all the solutions we have, and if we look at the cities, in addition to urban mobility, which I fully agree with what you said, in terms of the investment required. But if we look at the major cities, it is amazing that with all the technology we have, we continue wasting so much time in moving from one place to another with cars, for example. If I go to Buenos Aires, I get off at Ezeiza airport, and I go to the city center, it might take one time. If I get off in Sao Paulo airport, the same thing happens there. So it's quite amazing to see that we continue having a problem, although so much technology has been developed. And this is our position. We want to have zero congestion. And if we look into the future, what we seek to achieve is to develop new technology, and that is where the one-star system steps in. This is an application where the customers have information on the vehicle, is starting the car with an application and so on. So this is a future whereby through an application we have a smarter form of transport and a different type of traffic. So maybe through an application I can ask the car to go where I am, and in that way I can get onto the car and go wherever I wish to go, but with a solution through which, once I reach my destination, I have a solution whereby the car go to a parking place somehow. If we look at the case of the United States, for example, they already have a solution, which are the autonomous vehicles, robotaxi.
So everything that can be done with AI in this industry is impressive. Yes, it's impressive because today for instance, with Google, it's a search tool, it's a search engine through keywords, but artificial AI goes beyond that because AI enables you to interact with the tool and you may have a dialogue. I may download a presentation about any topic that I'm seeking. And of course, AI applied to our industry certainly will lead to a lot of progress, and maybe in the short to medium time, I may have a solution where I won't waste so much time in moving from one place to the other, or if I have to, if it takes me 15 minutes, well, maybe I can do something else. Yes, as autonomous vehicles. Yes, they enable me to do something else. Good, Alexandra. We all saw a truck outside here, an e-truck. It's a great challenge, isn't it? To go to larger vehicles with more needs. From the point of view of autonomy, thinking of long-haul trips and being able to search alternatives rather than fossil fuel. There's a lot to talk about that, but how far have we reached? Well, decarbonization is does not just imply electrification. It's important to point that out for everybody, but because electrification is a part of it. We have the view that electrification comes to support urban centers where really we have large concentrations of people, and for short haul or medium haul trucks and buses. For other options, we understand that there are fuels that will support decarbonization more efficiently. We will still have we'll still use fuels. Now the question is what fuel? It may be hydrogen, may be a biofuel, because indeed there are solutions that may even use a single battery with chargers along a road. But what would be the cost of that infrastructure? So we understand that electromobility is important. It will be latent. It will be in the urban centers, in trucks of short and medium whole trips, but alternative fuels are developing. They will get here. It won't take long, including the hydrogen cell, hydrogen, and especially biofuel. So you think that hydrogen is closer to be a solution? Yes, today we already have products that are being tested in Europe together even with other competitors. We are working jointly developing that. But today, the great challenge of hydrogen is not the product. As we discussed with electromobility some years ago, that is the future. Electromobility is a reality today. Now the challenge continues to be with electricity and hydrogen. That is production, how to move from one place to the other, and also how to maintain it, because that's the cost that we have today. Good. Alvaro, we just said that electromobility is not the only thing. What else is being done in terms of sustainability? What are the challenges facing CUTSA? Well, in September 2021, we presented the planning guide for urban sustainable mobility in Uruguay, work funded by Euroclima with the consultant Redes and the Ministry of Transportation, of Housing and Land Management, and the Environment and Economy. It's an official guide that should be the book that we consult every day, because not only do we need large projects for infrastructure, that I'm happy to be discussing this, but there are also daily challenges. And if we don't go in the same direction, in the end, people may lose quality of life, and significantly. And let me give you an example. In the last 10 to 15 years, 20 years rather, from 2002 to date, we have lost 20% of commercial speed of public transportation, not just buses, but also cars, because of the increase in the number of cars. 20% is a lot in terms of quality of life and hours in your life. And in terms of cost, just to give you a piece of information, if the urban fleet and suburban fleet of transportation has 2,000 buses, that is equivalent to 400 buses. So we had to improve a lot in giving other tools to offer to make bus trips more attractive, because obviously that delay in our speeds made us improve a lot in logistics to keep a reasonable coverage. But it's absolutely unfair. So you can't wait until you find the final solutions. Yes, indeed. With regard to sustainable mobility and a guideline for planning, in the introduction, they present the new paradigm of sustainable mobility. I could summarize it as the transit engineering. The streets are seen as transportation means and not as a public space. So we need to focus on people and not on vehicles. So it's not a matter of how many cars I can move an hour in the street, but how many people can move through here. So in that regard, the global strategy could be summarized in 3 words. To avoid the unnecessary trips, we need things to be closer to people, working and finding health services, making people use more buses instead of the cars, and to reduce, having depleted the possibilities of preventing and changing, we need to mitigate and to reduce the local emissions. And that is, if And now, if we think how the electric vehicles are manufactured and the components that they need, it's not so environmental friendly. In Uruguay, the good thing is that our matrix is all of renewable energies, but in other places where that is not the case, it's just you're changing the place where pollution is produced. So in that strategy of preventing, changing, and reducing, we see that it is absolutely necessary to move forward with those infrastructure projects, but there are low-cost solutions that need to be taken while we wait for that. So we need, for instance, only bus lanes that may be respected and that may speed the traveling in buses. Sometimes I say, well, we need more paint and to paint the lanes and cameras to automatically issue fines. So if we think of the large projects, we think that they are very positive. There are aspects that can be debated. And I think that the rigidity, not of the rails, is a complication. On Distrito de Julio, we have more than 100 events a year where they cut the traffic, and an engineering project needs to consider that. So those those events will continue to happen. So the flexibility of wheels is important, and battery buses are charged at night where there's idle capacity for energy. For instance, well, in the case of the tramway, the cable car, that would be a problem. Well, we still have more questions. We'll leave it for next time. We thank the three of you for having been with us today. So thank you, Claudio Agostini from General Motors, Alexandre Selski, Director of Mobility, Electric Mobility and Volvo Buses in Latin America, and Alvaro Santiago, Deputy General Manager of CUTSA. So now we are going to discuss another way of approaching the topic, and it has to do with the world of the resources, the finances, the funds available to implement these changes. So we receive Andres Garcia, who will be with us now. Andres Garcia is head of corporate and investment banking in BBVA, and he's going to introduce us into topics that have to do with the funds, the resources, what are the projects that are in course here and in the region, and what are the tools and instruments that we may have available to address those challenges. So, well, we are then going to, and then we are going to introduce the Kairos project, green hydrogen. And well, thank you, Andres, for being with us. Thank you. Thank everybody for the invitation and for coming. What's the commitment? What's the line of action that the bank has in this matter of sustainable mobility? Yes, that's a topic that I really like to discuss, and especially now. The first thing is to understand that we are facing a new strategic cycle of the group from 25 to 29, and many players are wondering what will happen with a strategic commitment to sustainability, especially considering what's happening, especially in the United States, with that change in the sustainability approach. So many international banks, in a way, had to quit their partnerships that they had for 2050. And really, we are very happy to speak of several things. The first is that not only do we continue to be committed, but it continues to be a strategic priority for the next 25 years. So, and when we speak of strategic priority, it's not discourse, there are many actions. One is very relevant. The commitment that we had for mobilizing €3 billion now is duplicated to $700 billion for 2029. So there's a commitment to mobilize that money. And there's another commitment that is even more relevant because of what it implies, and it is continuing to committed to be net zero emissions by 2050. And this is important because when the banking is committed like that, what it means is that the portfolio that has been achieved in two ways. Or either we quit lending, or you accompany, because so each dollar that you give, we are measuring its impact in terms of emissions. And to the degree that we have a commitment of being carbon neutral in coal, for instance, we couldn't have a transition for coal. So we announced an exit of the coal. We won't give any more loans after 2030.
So this will lead to having lesser impact on the emissions. In terms of mobility specifically, we have a commitment whereby the reductions by 2030 is 46% of our baseline. And once again, this does not imply that in 2030, which is around the corner, we're going to lend 45% less. We're going to lend more. But we need to support and accompany the sector through the decarbonization process. And how are you supporting these trends? How are you accompanying these trends specifically? What changes are taking place that you accompany with these proposals? Well, we have announced several things. In general terms, we are focusing on clean tech at the bank, which is being materialized in two different ways. One is the way we're used to, maybe aborting projects in clean tech, in carbon capture, and really providing advice and loaning. So this is a tangible part. There's a relevant part which is focused on the investments we do in terms of equity in companies that are focused on innovation. We see in clean tech quite clearly that there is a need to more rapidly develop the entire process of technology in order to lower the prices. And this largely depends on the development. In terms of market trends, we see this as follows. There are two different speeds or paces. One has to do with aviation and maritime transport, where the decarbonization levers are most focused on efficiency and the renovation of the fleets and becoming 20% more efficient, and in terms of port and airport infrastructure with more efficient criteria. But this is not transformational. Transformational involves more alternative fuels, which we have discussed extensively, but this will be a more lengthy process. We have to start right away, but it will take longer. The automobility is transformationally. The technologies are already there. We have electrification. And in these different stages and processes, we have to become involved in different ways. One is providing advice from moment zero and adapting our loan and financial instruments based on the specific needs of the value chain. Everything that involves relocation of industries, because this is also geopolitical in terms of the automotive industry, the relocation of industries, procurement, that involves major investments. And this has to do with sustainable funding through bonds or through green loans or index loans with sustainability indicators. That is a specific aspect. But also along the value chain, we can see the way we tackle the demand on e-vehicles. We have preferential cases for options that are for e-vehicles regarding regular combustion vehicles. And what is being implemented in Uruguay? From what I have said, some are already active and others are in the pipeline. So in Uruguay, This is something that we're doing locally. Everything that involves support to loans through specific loans regarding sustainability, for example, purchasing an electric vehicle, that is quite clear. Our rate is a lower rate compared to purchasing a combustion vehicle. But let's go beyond this. The government here has opened an interesting path through the bonds related to sustainability indices. I think that is not being used adequately. This is a private undertaking, yes, to land this in private funding. So the bonds require much higher values linked to sustainability indicators. Yes, the structure is far simpler, and we support right from the outset. Very often, companies have needs that are not so easy to allocate to specific projects or the specific procurement of panels for an energy-efficient project. Or those investments are already made, but they have impact at corporate level. For example, emission reduction, which in a green loan is not seen. I don't need the money for that, but I need resources. Loans linked to sustainability indicators allow for that flexibility. The use of funds can be for those that the company requires, but this is linked to those KPIs that the company has established. And if these are met, there's a reduction in the rate. We already have mechanisms with this aim. These are not as expensive for the companies yet. So meeting these indicators and demonstrating this. The important thing is that this has been done for companies. Let me explain. This is an important message. The financial instrument won't make you transform the sustainability. But when a company already has this as part of its strategy, either because it's natively sustainable or because it's in the process, then they already do, for example, carbon footprint measurement. This is already part of these companies who have to take advantage of these indicators that they already exist, so that these can be linked to the financial instruments, so that the bank can then assist in these developments, because the bank ultimately plays a double role, a double capacity to promoting and providing incentives of promoting sustainability through better rates, and also the challenge of generating instruments that are easily accessible in order to assist the sector to evolve. Yes, precisely. And what I was saying first, we have the commitment that makes us somehow to become involved in the transformation process. Otherwise, the financing process finishes. And secondly, the entire space is there for innovation, not technological innovation only, but also associated to funding instruments. Let me give you an example. Confirming is an instrument that companies are now using quite a lot to assist the providers along the value chain. We also have links of the providers. We establish goals, and together with the company, goals are established for these providers or suppliers, and then the rate will be even better. So this is promoted all along the value chain through instruments such as these. So there's no normal financial product that doesn't have the capacity of becoming innovative and becoming sustainable. Thank you very much, Andrés. Thank you very much, Andrés Garcia, Vice President of Corporate Banking of BBVA in Uruguay. We'll now go on to the Kairos project with us. Members of the 3 companies related to this project. Welcome. It's a pleasure to be here with you. As I was saying, the interesting thing here is that there are 3 Uruguayan companies that are leaders in their areas and have come together to work on this project linked to green hydrogen. Gabriel Antonacho, Director of Operations of Ventus, Gonzalo Irrazábal, Sustainable Business Development Director at Freilog, and Agustín López, General Manager of Fidocar in Uruguay. So let us present the project, Gabriela. Tell us about this project that is going to be developed in Rio Negro that is aimed at transport in the forestry industry. This project has began to be developed 3 years ago, and at Ventus, we saw the topic of hydrogen as something that had to be developed in order to bring about a change in the haulage grid. We found partners, Uruguayan companies that are also leaders in the sector, as is the case of Fidocar and Freilog. Last year, we signed this contract and began with this project. The important thing is that this project has been built and developed and operated by Uruguayan companies that are leaders in this industry. We think that this is part of a second energy transition that will contribute to decarbonization of transport, bring about a change in the logistics of the forestry sector, hand in hand with Freilog and Fidocar. So it's in the city of Fray Ventos, in the department of Fray Ventos, associated with the company Montes del Plata. The green hydrogen plant is associated with a solar farm. Yeah, so that the hydrogen is green, it has to be based on a renewable energy source. This is a solar farm of 4.9 megawatts, and it uses cutting-edge technology. These are bifacial panels, fixed structures. This is developed in the city of Fray Ventos. We have an electrolyzer. All our vendors have to have approved technologies. So QMIS, in terms of the electrolyzer, and other vendors have tested these technologies and other projects in the world. So here we have the option of having this initial project on green hydrogen in Uruguay, this initial project in Latin America for haulage. And are the hydrogen refueling stations ready? Well, these are the processes that are being developed. The engineering process has been completed, and now the different components are being manufactured, and these will be available as from the second semester next year. The solar farm is being constructed. We're setting up the mechanical sides and other elements, so hopefully it will be operational by the beginning of next year. This is the production of solar energy, and by the end of next year, we'll start with the production of green hydrogen. Let's speak about Freilog. Gonzalo, this is a logistics company that is linked to the zone. You also have developed in the region and are linked to the forestry company, not only to Montes del Plata, but also UPM. Thank you, Luis. Thank you for the invitation. For us, it is a pleasure to be here today, sharing this moment. And let me tell you what this project is about. Freilog is a logistics company that provides haulage services from the origin, right from the outset, was linked to the forestry sector. For customers such as Montes del Plata, this expanded to biomass fuels and biochemicals. As part of this plan, we understood that it was necessary to focus on decarbonization of transport. Together with Ventus and with Fidocar, we have focused on this project as part of the decarbonization. We understand that all technologies will be part of this energy transformation. Electromobility is included, green hydrogen, and of course, other types of technologies that we'll be having in the future. Frilog, as part of this ecosystem, we move different types of products. We understood it was very important to be pioneers and to really have a firm position. We are in the zone, we have a logistics center in Fray Ventos, and the project is in a continuous project. We understand there will be major synergies for operations.
This will operate for Monte del Plata with 6 trucks, with Hyundai. And the idea is that to test technology, to have this as a pilot test. It's the first one in Latin America. It's iconic, as Gabriela said, and we understand that it's a good point of departure for Uruguay as we accelerate this second transition. So, and what changes do you think in the performance of the logistics with trucks like this? Now we're going to talk about the trucks. Now you already have a long development, many years with the traditional trucks. So what is the change? What do you plan? Well, on the one hand, we understand that what has to do with the way we handle cargo, there won't be too many changes. But we think that tractors and maintenance of tractors, that part, yes, we will learn hand in hand with Hyundai and their local representative, Fidocar. We understand that there's a challenge. There are lessons to be learned in terms of how the new tractors are going to perform and the new equipment. For us, energy consumption, gas oil today is very important. All our team works a lot trying to do it as efficiently as possible. So there, we need to have a learning curve to see how these tractors behave, moving freight for Monte de Plata. And please, I don't want to forget, I'm telling you that all this project has the support of the Santander Group. They were very important. They were instrumental to make this come true as part of the group of companies. So Agustin Fidocar, as Gonzalo said, represents Hyundai. Well, the e-buses, it's not for Hyundai. There's the development and experience in other countries. Yes. And Hyundai, as representatives in Uruguay, we have been working with hydrogen for 10 years. Well, for 20 years, actually. They started with Korea, then pilot tests in Europe. They have a fleet of more than 80 trucks between Switzerland, Germany, France. Then they were awarded a bid in Oakland, in the US. So these are trucks that have been running for years, and we've seen that. So we are working with a truck that's been working for many years. And I listened to Rival earlier said we don't need to invent many things. Well, the good thing about the pioneers work in Uruguay is that they are quite reassuring. It's a 6x4 tractor truck, And what is the difference between the diesel truck? Well, what happens is it's the engine train is electric. It moves with electricity. In the plant that we will build, we take water, we give electricity, and we separate hydrogen from oxygen, and then we compress it to 900 bars. In the truck, they receive 700 bars because of the pressure cascade. The truck is a diesel truck. It gets charged in 10 minutes. You have to, so with 70 kilos of hydrogen that you can, the autonomy is 700 kilometers. It's similar to diesel. And well, our radio is Fray Bentos, 350 kilometers round trip. Yes, so you can cover it with that autonomy. Yes. So we create a logistics center in Fray Bentos, and the operation, it's not not too different from a diesel truck. The truck takes the hydrogen that was compressed in the truck. You take oxygen from the atmosphere. You make it react chemically with hydrogen. You produce electricity that moves the truck, and what comes from the exhausting pipe is water. It's water. So it's the other way around. Yes, it's 100% clean energy entirely in all the loop, both for producing hydrogen and later. The issue of water, that in the hydrogen projects they speak a lot. We take water, we separate it, and we put it back in the truck, and it is all left there. So both in power and autonomy, the truck, it's like a diesel truck in this case. And as we have a store hydrogen, the batteries are much smaller. So the truck is not so heavy, so they can transport wood, timber as a conventional truck. Yes, that's important too. So going back, Gabriela, Ventus has been associated with many projects in Uruguay related with renewable and unconventional energies. So in a first project of green hydrogen, it opens the door to associating to other projects, for instance, with wind and solar, that may also have this second stage of industrialization and production of fuel. Yes, well, this is a pilot project, and it will open many doors. As a matter of fact, much of the group of Kairos, Gonzalo, was in Rotterdam last week, and many companies approached them to learn about this project, because there's no doubt that it will be something that will be implemented elsewhere too. It's a pilot project, and as we said, the technologies have already been proven, and it can be replicated not just in Uruguay but in other places in the world. Yes, okay. So, but pilot, it's a scale. So the possibility of having a greater production, yes, absolutely. So it can include other fleets. So, Gonzalo, do you look beyond this pilot, just thinking of broader logistics? Yes, indeed. As we were saying, the group has the objective of the group. We presented it last year in Latam Renewables, in an important event. We presented our strategy, and it is aim at decarbonizing transport, and we are a key player. So incorporating different technologies make us test for each freight, for each service that we provide, which is the adequate technology. So we need to be a part of this project from the very beginning, so that we can give a service to clients with reducing our emissions as possible. So we are working in that direction. And we understand that in this consortium, There's a good complementation of capacities. Bentos with their experience in renewable energy, and we with operation, logistic, and relations with the different players, and of course with the trust that we have with the Hyundai family. That's the key, right? Being able to work with the three companies. Agustin, we mentioned 6 to 8 trucks. Yes, 6, and now yes, we may have 8 at the end. So there is supply of vehicles. So you will have it right after you can produce. Yes, well, the truck is in the pipe. It comes from the factory. What we need now in Uruguay is more supply points. Just as we are working with this project, we need more private players or the public sector to put more points of hydrogen charge in Montevideo, in Tacuarembó maybe. The autonomy is 700 kilometers. So going beyond those 700, yes. I have 352 for eventos, but if there's a point in Montevideo, then I can do 700. So Uruguay, being small, if you have 2 to 3 points to charge hydrogen, it's already enough. And you can decarbonize many sectors. Now, this is a pilot experience with timber. However, if you have 3 points, you have all the territory. In Uruguay, we don't have mountains. It's very flat. So you can cover the entire territory with this technology. So you need to dare do it. Just that. Well, thank you. I want to thank the three of you, Gabriela, Gonzalo, Agustin. It's been a pleasure. And now we have a couple more parts. Thank you. I want to thank those of you that are with us. Let's go back to finances. We have Juan Carlos Ranfo, Director of Communications and Sustainability of Scotiabank. How are you? So thank you for coming. You've been there all morning. You've listened. Quite a busy agenda, right? Yes, there's not much to say. Well, you are going to say something. You are going to be able to add. How do you position, how is Scotiabank positioned? Well, first of all, it's quite challenging to add anything new after everything we've heard. Fortunately, we see many highly committed players with very interesting content. I've been thinking of
Hice un mix y me tengo que poner los lentes porque ha pasado el tiempo. Bueno, Álvaro Santiago habló del foco en las personas, de que todo esto de la movilidad sostenible al final del día no es un tema de tecnología ni de cambio en la matriz, sino de cómo mejoramos la calidad de vida de las personas, cómo nosotros desarrollamos nuestras comunidades. Y luego Alejandro Ruibal habló de hacer el plan Ceibal de la movilidad y de apurar el paso, de dejar esa cosa medio anquilosada que nos gusta tanto, ese andar medio lento al cual estamos acostumbrados los uruguayos, de animarnos. Y me trajo alguna reflexión que hice en otro foro, que es el tema del granito de arena. Es decir, bueno, cada uno apostamos, vayamos poniendo nuestro granito de arena para contribuir al desarrollo sostenible, patatín, patatán. Y nos quedamos más o menos contentos con eso, porque han dicho, bueno, dale, el granito de arena, el granito de arena.
So now they speak of the piece of sand. And now with a grain of sand, it's not enough. We have to go to a pail of sand and a truck of sand, and the truck needs to use clean energy. So, and I'm happy, but I love to listen to representatives of different places, and we are committed to moving forward in sustainability in general terms, and in mobility, sustainable or electric mobility, not just electric in specific terms. So I think that this is something that I'm taking home. And I think that it's something that we should all think of. There is a reason why we came here, just to so that we can move forward, because this is being streamed for I don't know how many thousands of people through streaming. We greet those people from here, and it is important to generate that critical mass. So, do you want to ask questions? Because if not, I can just get started. We've known each other for a long time. Yes, quite a lot. So tell me, how do you materialize the commitment of Scotia? Well, there's an issue that is, and I'll promise that I'll talk about business.
So we heard about the commitment of BBVA. There are very similar agendas. The banking system makes progress in similar ways. But let me expand on this in a while. But give me one more minute to expand on the cultural aspect. This can be also similar in the banking system or in the different industries. Scotiabank is an organization that has a very big capillarity. It is in various parts of the country. It has more than 1,000 employees directly, has 500,000 customers. It works every day with major providers, with thousands of providers. It has relations with many stakeholders at state level, at municipal level, and of all kinds. And this makes you be very responsible as an organization, because you are an opinion leader. That is a condition that exists. But the thing is, what do you do with that? So when you have that capacity, when you are so involved in that social and economic mesh, the government mesh, you then have the responsibility of being an opinion leader, of being a bridge. And this leads me to that part. What do you do with that then? So that is why we are seated here, not to speak about the wonderful things we do, but because we believe that the banking system has to make its contribution. When we speak about sustainability and driving sustainability, we want to be present. So when El País invited us, but we're also at other forums, we raise a hand and we say, yes, we want to be present in order to send out those signs. This is an organization that has the capacity of having an impact on society that is very big. So in terms of culture, now let me go on to that topic. Yes, we do specific things in addition to this. This is in line with what the industry is doing. For many years now, we have been encouraging electric mobility in terms of consumption. This is being reflected in our portfolio regarding loans for hybrid or electric vehicles. And this is with different brands. I prefer not to mention any brands. But to state this in numbers, over the past 3 years, the number of loans for vehicles, for hybrid or electric vehicles, went from 1% to about 18% today. This is quite impressive. And I think this is what we see out there on the streets. Everyone wants to have a hybrid or an electric car today. I don't know whether because that is cool or whatever, but it is quite impressive. And these are growth loans that we'd like to have with any product, which is not even the case. And we also agree with BBVA that we started out with this a long time ago. And you could also say, well, Juan Carlos, today you want to have hybrid or electric cars. Do you fund that? Well, it is, of course, a business, but we are involved in business, but we also fund these rates. That is our contribution driving this topic. If you want to buy a hybrid or electric car, my loan will be cheaper compared if you wish to buy a fossil fuel vehicle. And when we were encouraging this from the top management, they were not so thrilled about this. Now, we also fund at a more corporate level. We provide funding for fleets. For example, the bus company Kutsa or other transport companies, truck fleets. So as part of our business, we're also promoting electric mobility. So we have to speed up, not only us, because we have a minute and a half left, but we have to speed up the pace of this change that is being imposed on us. What else can you add? I think, once again, and I'm going back to the beginning, the financial instruments are there. We can promote these through marketing, and there are specific products. We participate in green bonds. There are specific products, but in general terms, financial products are commodities somehow. They are at the service of the needs of companies and persons. So the banking system that is committed with the development of Uruguay, its community and individuals, is at the disposal to fund those projects that persons, companies, or governments might have. I was listening to Alejandro Rival. He said, well, let us start working. And I'm sure that the banks are looking forward to funding infrastructure networks that favor development, that contribute to the development of the country and its people. This is not just small talk. We will do fine if the country does fine and if the persons are also doing fine. So what we do is to facilitate this process through making economic resources available. And there's not much more science about this. We do believe in people. And I will stop. I always like to go back to the etymology of the word credit. The etymology comes from credere. Banks believe credere. We believe in the persons whom we loan money to, because we think they're going to make proper use of that money, that they will be paying us back, and people believe in us when they entrust us with their deposits. That is the concept of credit, credere, believing. And they say, well, okay, Juan Carlos, what are you telling us now? Well, I think that is present. We have to believe in ourselves in order to drive this agenda forward. And I'd like to thank El País for driving this forward, for inviting us year after year to come up here. And, well, we can say, well, we didn't do that much last year, or didn't we? So the intention is to speed up this process, and we're all committed with this. You can count on Scotiabank and also with the different players in order to make progress with this agenda. Thank you very much, Juan Carlos. So we're almost close to the end. We'd like to invite Mr. Alejandro Nario, chemical engineer from the Ministry of the Environment. He is a director of quality and environment, DINASEA. Welcome. Now we have a ministry that has the mandate of working this topic. Well, congratulations to the organizers. We followed the interesting audience you had through streaming. It's good to use the different channels to reach different audiences, and particularly to deal with topics such as these. Particularly after changing the grid, decarbonization is something that we have been working on for quite a long time now. Yes, sustainable transport is of key importance, and the world is discussing the transition in more general terms, going from a model that is based on carbon and oil to other more sustainable models. And it was quite interesting to hear during the talks that the focus was on the persons and not so much on the technologies, because in fact, it's important to think about sustainable transport as a whole, and the ministry is not only promoting electric transformation and green hydrogen and other options, but how this takes place in the cities, how this is planned, the noise that is generated, how this affects the population, and pollution of traditional buses, for example. So viewing this as a whole is very positive. Yes, these are variables that go beyond just the four wheels. You're not speaking about modalities and technologies only, but looking at the different aspects at environmental level. Yes, precisely. This has many different impacts. We are adjusting the decree on batteries, which was for lead and acid, but now we'll have to have an update regarding batteries that are no longer used and see what we can do with these. So as a ministry, we want to be ahead of this. So there are very many issues related to this. And this is, of course, very, very soon. These are things that are just around the corner. What are you doing in this regard? Well, we're working with international cooperation on the possibility of not only exporting to countries that generate that possibility of recovering this from batteries, but also considering second use, for example, for stationary batteries. In that case, we face certain challenges from the regulatory standpoint, but the second use, and in the context of sustainability, of course, materials are not infinite. We have to achieve the circularity of materials, reusing materials, and Second Life is something that we are promoting. And this is even for vehicles. We heard that the Minister of the Interior is going to go out and control the motorbikes. Can we reuse motorbikes? Can we reuse the engines? So there are many things out there that has to do with things involved in changing, when you change technologies. For example, what is the life of a battery? For example, repaying when you purchase something through a leasing option. So maybe people want to sell the vehicle, but not the battery from the environmental standpoint. Yes, of course, we're facing many challenges. In terms of planning, we know that the Ministry of Transport is working on the corridor from Montevideo to Canelones. They're working very intensively on this. And this also involves sustainable public transport. There are many challenges we have out there as a country. It's positive to have organized forums such as this. I was listening to the speakers from the banking system. The financial system is very important. We'll see whether a project is sustainable or not. But there have to be very clear rules. So the ministry there plays an important role in analyzing the processes and generating indicators so that projects that are funded are in fact sustainable from the economic, environmental, and social standpoint. Yes, we heard a while ago about the green hydrogen project. This also involves regulations. you have to facilitate and regulate at the same time. Yes, that is why I was saying in terms of e-mobility, you can have different strategies. Electricity is the one that has been developed most, but of course, hydrogen is just around the corner. We have these major projects for Uruguay, and also thinking beyond this. This will be an interesting experience to see how mobility works with hydrogen in Uruguay. I think this will be an interesting project. What other challenges are you facing in the short term in the context of sustainability and mobility? Well, I was saying in the ministry specifically, what mobility implies as a challenge today. You were saying a while ago, the transformation of the matrix is amazing. We cannot think about the past. We have to think forward. What will be the next feat we'll have as a country when we travel elsewhere in the world? There is a strong dependence on oil. So I think we can really take major steps forward. In mobility, the gap is still big. Today, 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions come from transport. So there we have a major area we can grow. And as an environmental authority, you have to be updated when accepting a project or not. You have to include new capacities. That is an ongoing challenge we have at the ministry.
Trajimos un experto internacional, ahora tenemos un puerto aeroespacial que se está planteando en Rocha y tenemos las plantas de hidrógeno verde, una para metanol, otra para combustible.
So we are generating capacities. We are doing capacity building. We're training people, and I think that Uruguay, sometimes the Ministry of the Environment is seen as a barrier, but it's a great partner actually, because the projects that come to the ministry end up being more sustainable than when they came in. In Uruguay, that's a net worth. So it's an asset. So we end up making the project sustainable time through your suggestions. Yes, through those discussions with we end up approving the projects better from the point of view of sustainability. And really, we feel that Uruguay has to grow. We are aware that Uruguay needs to grow, but sustainably, because if you're in an industry and after 6 months you have an environmental conflict or you pollute a river, and then it's not environmentally sound. So we feel that we have this responsibility. I think that Uruguay has a state policy that goes beyond administrations. If we were to speak of the roadmap, there is continuity. Yes, there is continuity, and that's a key thing. And the issue of mobility, we've worked in several terms. The previous administration issued an important decree for mobility, and this administration resumes it and doubles the trust. So I think that that's a very good thing of the country, that we have this consistency in our policy. Alejandro, it was important to have the Ministry of the Environment in an event like this. Well, thank you. And I think that these things always add. Thank you. See you. Well, and with this, we close. It's been a pleasure to be with you. I just want to thank the chambers that supported this event, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Germany, the French and Uruguayan Chamber, the Italian and the Nordic countries, and the sponsors, UTE, ANCAP, GP, BBVA, SACEM, Volvo cars, Volvo trucks, Goyer and Regules, Isbel, Enertrac, Enel, Nestlé, the Chamber of Construction too, that gave us their support. And we also want to thank the Ministry of Transportation and Public Works, the Ministry of the Environment, Energy and Mining, Red Uruguay, DERES, Comaro Uruguay, the Spanish Chamber. So thank you for coming, those of you here and those remotely.